Okay, good evening. We're getting into the Fourth Commandment tonight, lesson 23. And with this commandment, a little bit of a shift of gears. In the first three commandments, we covered the first table of the law, love the Lord your God. Now, we're going to be looking at the second table of the law, love your neighbor as yourself. And with each of these commandments, we're going to discover that God is protecting something that belongs to our neighbor. So looking at the fourth commandment, let's join together in reading it out loud. Honor your father and mother, that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. What does this mean? We should fear and love God, that we do not dishonor or anger our parents and others in authority, but honor, serve, and obey them, and give them love and respect. So, starting things out here, we're going to be looking at God's representatives. The wording of the fourth commandment calls special attention to parents, obviously, but they aren't the only authority figures that the fourth commandment is speaking of. First of all, Ephesians 6, 1-2. Jenica, read that, please.
Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise.
So the first group of authority figures are God's representatives that he wants us to honor are the parents. Next one, Jalen.
Remember your leaders in the church who spoke the word of God to you. Carefully consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate in their faith. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as men who will give an account. Obey them so that they may do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no benefit to you.
The second one are leaders in the church. And just a couple of things to highlight there. It says, carefully consider the outcome of their way of life. Now, can I see what the outcome of Caleb's life is at this point in time? Why not?
He's too young.
He's too young, yeah. Even in his 20s, he's too young. 30s, too young. When you start to get maybe a little bit in your 40s, you're starting to see something, but definitely 50s and 60s, you're getting a good idea of what the outcome of this person's life is like. And he says, imitate their faith. Not necessarily that you're doing exactly what they are doing, but you're adopting their overall approach to life. Why is it that, typically speaking, those whose service is full-time to the church, their children are much more likely to retain their Christian faith into their adulthood years and pass it on to their children than are the children of the typical lay people. And a lot of that has to do with their overall approach to life, their dedication to their Lord, their modeling the Christian faith in the home, they're taking their children to church regularly. All of these things. And then he also says at the end there, so that they may do this with joy and not groaning. Little word of advice or words of wisdom for you. If your parents aren't happy with you, you're not going to enjoy their parenting as much. Letitia's like, yep. When you're making it hard on them, it's going to be harder on you. A similar way in regard to the classroom. If the classroom is constantly disruptive, now the teacher is not able to focus as much on the material and the content of what they're teaching. Now they're focused on being a classroom manager, so they're a little bit distracted. They might get a little bit frustrated and edgy, and they're not going to be as effective of a teacher. And that's not a benefit to you. Yes?
Sounds like our 5th grade year here.
What do you mean? That was the year before I came. What do you mean?
That's when we had breaks in our class.
Oh, yes. Yes. Very true. I did ask. So I stepped into that one, not thinking about the full ramifications of it, but yeah. All right, third passage, Jada.
Submit to every human authority because of the Lord, for the
to the king as the supreme authority, or to rulers as those who have been sent by him to punish those who do what is wrong and to praise those who do what is right.
All right, so notice government is the third answer here. And what I was going to say is notice that he doesn't specify any particular form of government. In fact, he gives a number of different examples. Now, question 2, what I was getting at, according to the underlined portions of these passages, what is a positive result of obeying God's representatives? And that is right there, that they will enjoy their work, which is going to make things better for us. Taking up your illustration, Ladecia, I bet your 5th grade teacher was quite distracted. And
He liked to crawl on the floor.
he wasn't, that's okay, I don't need to know examples and whatnot. But your teacher wasn't as capable of taking care of what he was supposed to in the class. And you suffered for it, and others suffered for it.
And Mr. Neely, he was here too.
Uh-huh, okay.
I love that guy.
Yep. So we saw the word submit, okay? The word submit means to give over or yield to the power or authority of another. It doesn't necessarily imply that the one doing the submitting is inferior in any way. Especially when you look at how that Greek word hypotasso is used. I know in the English language the word submit sometimes has the idea behind it of unwillingly or grudgingly given. Like you think of wrestling and you put somebody into a submission hold where they're forced to tap out. The Greek word hypotasso does not carry any baggage like that. It just simply means arranging oneself underneath another person for the sake of order and authority. So part 2 then, why does God command us to submit to, honor, and obey his representatives in the home, church, and the state, or the government? Brody, Romans 13:1.
Everyone must submit to the governing authority. If no authority exists except by God, and the authorities that do exist have been established by God.
So according to the italicized portions of these passages, the first one here, why does God command us to submit to, honor, and obey his representatives?
Authorities. So we don't get in trouble with the law.
That is true, but looking at the italicized part, why do we submit to them? In particular, the first passage.
Established by God.
Yeah, their authority comes from God. God is saying, I'm putting you in charge. Think of it this way. The teacher leaves the room, and while the teacher leaves the room, teacher says, Macy, you're in charge. And everybody has to listen to Macy. Yeah, nobody does anyway. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Next passage, Caleb.
Children, obey the parents. Whoa. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this is pleasing in the Lord.
Yeah, pretty self-explanatory. This is something that pleases God. And there are some very good reasons for that. And we'll explore those as we go along here. But one of the big reasons why God puts people into positions of authority is that he intends to bring us various blessings in our lives. They are meant to be a blessing for us. Now, does that mean that sometimes those in authority don't abuse their power or behave poorly? No. I mean, that happens. We're all sinful people. But generally, even in situations where there is corruption, there still also are blessings that can be found. You think of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, there was corruption and there was bad or instances of bad miscarriages of justice. And yet, on the whole, things were much better in the ancient Mediterranean world during the Roman Empire than at any point previously in world history up to that point. So there can be blessings found even in the presence of corruption. And we got a number of passages here to get to before we get to the answer for question 1, or the answers, I should say. So let's just start knocking them down. Ladesha, Hebrews 13:7.
Remember your leaders in the church who spoke the word of God to you. Carefully consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith.
All right, notice what the leaders in the church do. They speak the word of God. Aaliyah, 1 Timothy 4.
The Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy, a young pastor of the church, pay close attention to yourself and to the doctrine. Preserve in them,
Persevere.
persevere in them, because by doing this you will save both yourself and those who listen.
All right, so he's saying watch over your life, yourself, how you're living, but also what you are teaching, so that you will save both yourself and those who hear you. So you're making sure that you're teaching them the correct thing. And then 1 Peter 5 page.
Therefore, as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and as one of the who also shares in the glory that is about to be revealed, I appeal to the elders among you. Shepherd God's flock that is among you.
All right, so there's that sense of taking care of God's people. And we got the question here, number 1. I'm going to pause for a moment with the passages. God's representatives in the church, the government, and our home are to look out for our well-being and take care of us. God has given each of these entities special authority over different areas of our lives. Is each one primarily concerned with our physical well-being, our spiritual well-being, or both? So the leaders in the church, based off of what you just heard, which area are they specifically concerned with? Our spiritual, our physical well-being, or both, Macy?
Both.
Anybody else have something different? Spiritual?
Both. So I'm saying all of the above.
Is it really the church's business to be taking care of making sure that you're well fed and provided for with clothing?
Don't some churches
No.
do that?
No. I mean, charity, you're talking charity.
No,
But charity is different than having the responsibility of doing that.
Yeah.
And so, you understand what I'm saying? The church doesn't have the responsibility of doing that. So the church's primary concern is the spiritual caretaking. We can do that, those physical things, but that's called charity, and expressing our Christian faith. Our next reader, 1 Peter 2. Did you, if you, right, go ahead.
Submit to every human authority because of the Lord, whether to the king as the supreme authority or to governors as those who have been sent by him to punish those who do what is wrong and to praise those who do what is right.
Okay, we're talking about the government now. Notice talking about punishment for crimes and rewards for fulfilling your civic duty. Romans 13, verses 3 and 4, Jenica.
For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to evil. Would you like to have no fear of the one in authority? Do what is good, and you will receive praise from him, because he is God's servant for your benefit. But if you do wrong, be afraid, because he does not carry the sword without reason. He is God's servant, a punisher to bring wrath on the wrongdoer.
All right. So again, we hear about punishment for crimes, and also the government. What does the government bear? It bears the sword. What do you use a sword for?
Kill.
Slice and dice, kill. Also, just maybe even just to impose your will on another person. Like if I'm wielding a sword and I tell you that you better go do something or you're going to get it, you're probably going to do it, right?
No.
Yeah, right, Aaliyah. You're gonna be singing a very different tune if that were to ever happen to you. The government has the right to bear the sword, meaning the power to create and enforce laws, also the power to organize a military and wage just wars. Hosea 4, 1 through 3, Jada.
Hear the word of the Lord, you people of Israel. There is cursing, lying, murder, theft, and adultery. They break out in violence, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. Therefore the land mourns.
Pretty bad situation in Israel at the time of Hosea. And that was because there wasn't any law and order going on, and everybody was able to do whatever they wanted. So, the government, does it take care of our bodily needs, our spiritual needs, or both?
Well-being.
What's that, Caleb?
Well-being.
Which well-being?
Oh, the physical.
The physical, yeah. The physical well-being. Jalen, Proverbs 1.
To acquire discipline and act sensibly, to acquire righteous justice and fairness.
There's a lot more in there.
Oh, I thought you just said to read one.
No.
Oh.
Proverbs chapter 1, those verses there, yeah.
A wise person should listen, and he will increase learning. A person with understanding should obtain guidance. Listen, my son, to your father's discipline, and do not forsake your mother's teaching, because they are a garland of grace for your head. They are jewelry for your neck.
All right, notice father's discipline, mother's teaching. Next passage, Psalm 103, Caleb.
As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him.
1 Timothy 5, Brody.
But if anyone does not provide for his own family, and especially for his own household, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
Okay, so providing for your family. And last of all, Leah, Ephesians 6, 4.
Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord.
So parents, spiritual, physical, or both? Yeah, it's both. Yep. And this is why God calls special attention to parents in the wording of the Fourth Commandment, because they are tasked with the entire well-being, the care of their entire well-being of their children, bodily, spiritually, mentally, psychologically, all of that, the whole well-being of the individual. We're going to watch a Lutheran satire video here, which highlights, through satire, maybe a little bit of shocking expressions of it, the importance of the spiritual impact of parents in the home and the examples they set.
Would you mind waking the kids up for church?
I'd rather abandon my God-given authority as a father by letting them decide for themselves if they want to get up, thereby teaching them that choosing between hearing the Word of God and rejecting the Word is no different than choosing between Captain Crunch and Lucky Charms.
Would you like to have a prayer and devotion with the kids before dinner?
No. They go to church 1 hour a week. That should adequately prepare them to withstand every other waking moment of their lives when they are assaulted with the devil's temptations.
Are you going to come to church with us this morning?
No, I'm going to teach our children that church is only for old people and women in bad marriages by staying home and watching this episode of Saved by the Bell, where Jesse gets addicted to caffeine pills.
Would you mind waking the kids up for church?
Not at all. I'll just tell them that if they're not out of bed in 5 seconds, I'm going to tie them up outside, duct tape their eyes open, and make them watch as I jackhammer the TV into 1,000 pieces.
Would you like to have a prayer and devotion with the kids before dinner?
Of course. If I want them to understand what it means for God to be Father, I suppose their own father should give them some indication that he actually cares about their souls.
Are you going to come to church with us this morning?
Of course. I'm just watching one of these Jonathan Fisk videos before we go. And the Catholic faith is this, that we worship one God in Trinity, and Trinity in unity, neither confusing the persons nor dividing the substance. This guy is awesome. This is a lot less painful to watch than my congregation's liturgical dancers.
I really like that statement. If I want them to know what it means for God to be Father, perhaps I should give them some indication that their earthly father actually cares about their souls. Pretty powerful statement. You see, before you even set foot in this classroom, and even while you are attending, the spiritual impact that your parents have on you by how well they model the Christian faith is going to do more than anything that I teach you. I can teach you all the doctrines of the Bible. I can teach you what the Bible has to say about our attitudes and our love for God. I can help you as much as I can to grow in God's Word and to love God, love what Jesus has done for you. But if your parents aren't modeling that at home, the odds are I've already lost that battle. Number two, when you consider that mothers often take the lead in the spiritual development of their children, and just think about that for yourselves, those of you who do have both parents. Some people might be surprised at the absence of any mention of mothers in Ephesians 6:4, where it said, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger," or previous translations would say, "Do not exasperate your children," like unnecessarily frustrate them through an inconsistent message. Like dad sitting at home on the couch watching Saved by the Bell saying, "Go to church with mom," but dad himself is not going. It says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children." It doesn't say fathers and mothers. Why the emphasis on the fathers? Well, what does this chart show us about the impact that a father has on the spiritual development of their child? Which shows us why the Apostle Paul calls special attention to the fathers. So, what are the percentages or chances of a child growing up and holding on to their Christian faith? This comes from a study done like in the mid to late 1990s. All right, so it's a little bit dated, but I would imagine the numbers still skew somewhat similarly to this. If neither parent attends, probably just a 6% chance. When mom only attends with the kids, it only rises slightly to 15%. And yet when dad attends, all of a sudden we notice a huge, huge jump to 55. And of course, it's best when both parents are attending. Why is that? Why do you think that is? And especially true for the boys. Because if the boys are going to church with mom and they're seeing dad at home, eventually, even more so than the girls, they're gonna want to emulate their dad because they're dudes, and they're gonna push back against mom. But dad doesn't have to go, "Why do I?" Typically speaking, Jada, maybe I'm wrong on this one. I don't know the dynamics of your household. Who is more terrifying to you when they're yelling at you, your mom or your dad?
My dad.
Your dad.
My grandpa.
Same with you guys?
No.
No?
Their mom's scary.
Their mom's scared? Okay. Sorry, Kelly, if you hear that. Caleb, what did you say? No comment?
My father, probably.
Your father? Everybody?
My dad.
How about your dad? Yeah, I know, I'm not gonna ask you.
Mine's my grandma.
Dad? There's something about the male presence and that it can be more impactful, right? And it's not that women are lesser than men. It's just that God designed us with different roles and purposes. And sometimes you need to have a little bit more of that gravitas. And generally speaking, albeit on a spectrum, of course, because sometimes you get the intimidating mom, but generally speaking, the fathers are the ones that you are going to be more intimidated by, but you're also conversely going to be more willing to follow their example, their lead. And the studies bear this out. So if you want to write down an answer, there you go. The spiritual example of the father carries more weight with children than the example of mothers. Not knocking the moms at all, because like I said, this first part is very true. And my guess is that if I were to ask each of you, you probably generally would agree that your mom is more the spiritual head or driver in your house than the dad is. Not always, but generally speaking, that seems to be the case for whatever reason it is. And God bless the moms who do that, who take up that responsibility when their husbands are not, or in single mother households who just have no choice, but they have to do it. You love your moms, yes, and your moms do a wonderful job.
It's my grandpa. Or my grandma. My grandma terrifies me.
Your grandma terrifies you?
My grandpa scares me.
That's why your mom sends you over there sometimes.
Y'all? Well, then that's my grandpa's competition.
Yeah? Okay, moving on, question number 3. Unlike all the other 10 commandments, the fourth commandment has a special promise or incentive attached to it. The reason for this special incentive is that God understands how horrible and destructive life can be if this commandment isn't kept. It leads to, at the worst end of all things, riots, anarchy, troubled homes, etc. Think about what happened. It's not that long ago for us. May of 2020 in the Twin Cities, when George Floyd was murdered by that police officer. Think about the riots that ensued. You all probably saw bits of it on TV, right, Brody? So, to prevent these things from happening, God promises that life will go well for us. Now, is this promise an absolute truth, meaning that it's always going to happen no matter what? Or is this a general truth, meaning that it will generally but not always happen, Jenica? Will life always go well for you if you're obeying your parents, or will it generally go well?
Generally.
Yeah. Sometimes you get in trouble for doing the right thing, right? Sometimes your parents, they don't understand that, hey, you did the right thing. They might not have all the information. Sometimes the government is cruel and corrupt, and they don't want you to do the right thing. They want you to toe the party line. And the party line is not the right thing to do. At least in the eyes of God. Yes?
Can I go for now? Please?
When you're finished writing answer, sure. Now what's interesting is as you shift from the first table of the law to the second table, there are two things to really point out before I read the next quote from Martin Luther. The first is there's a natural transition as it goes from the authority and the glory of God, and now as he gets into our relationship with our neighbors, he covers the authority of humans, people. So there's a natural transition there. Another thing to keep in mind, we all know that sin is sin is sin is sin. All sin in God's eyes is equal. None is greater or worse to him. However, as we also know, certain sins are more destructive in their nature than others. And for that reason, I honestly feel that God in his wisdom arranged this second part of the law from commandments 4 through 8 in the way that he did, because out of all of commandments 4 through 8, the worst one, the one that can be the most dangerous in breaking it, is the fourth commandment. Next after that, fifth commandment. After that, sixth, and so on. And I think this quote from Martin Luther here really helps to explain that. Rebellion, that's a breaking of the fourth commandment, is not just simple murder. It is like a great fire which attacks and devastates a whole land. Thus rebellion brings with it a land filled with murder and bloodshed. It makes widows and orphans and turns everything upside down like the worst disaster. Therefore let everyone who can smite, slay, and stab secretly or openly, remembering that nothing can be more poisonous, hurtful, or devilish than a rebel. It is just as when one must kill a mad dog. If you do not strike him, he will strike you, and a whole land with you. Now, I don't know if Luther is actually being dead serious, that he's calling on people to actively go out and hunt down rebels. I think he's talking in hyperbole here, but he's doing so to emphasize the important truth of just how dangerous rebellion can be. Anarchy, rioting, how all of that can be. You see, murder, that covers the fifth commandment. Adultery, that covers the sixth commandment. Stealing, the seventh. False testimony, eighth. When you have rebellion, an aspect of the fourth commandment, you are going to have all of those other things happening along the way. And that's what makes it so terrible. Or at least you have the potential for those sorts of things happening. It is the ignition to lead to all of these other sins. So how do we break the fourth commandment? Wondering why the bear there. 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 2. Who did we read off or leave off with for reading? So Leah's up, or Ladesha? Ladesha, go ahead.
2 Timothy?
Yeah.
But know this, in the last days there will be terrible times, where people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, blasphemous, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy. Okay. Characterizing, he says, the last days. Now, we've been in the last days ever since Christ returned to heaven. Do we see these things going on? Yeah, of course we do. 2 Kings 2, page.
He went up from there to Bethel. While he was going up on the road, young boys came out from the city and mocked him. They said, "Go up, Baldy, go up, Baldy." So he turned around and looked at them and cursed them in the name of the Lord. 2 female bears came out of the woods, and they tore 42 boys to pieces.
So these guys thought that they could insult Elisha, the prophet, because he was a bald dude. They were insulting the prophet of the Lord. And let's just put it this way. I think pastors can take comfort in this passage that sicking 2 bears on a bunch of people who want to disrespect the pastors is not outside of God's arsenal of how to deal with those who disrespect his called workers. And now you're like, I'm sorry, Pastor Rhodia, for anything I've done to you. You haven't done anything serious, don't worry. But it shows that God's serious about this, doesn't it? Next passage, Proverbs 14, Macy.
A king favors a servant who acts wisely, but he is furious with one who acts shamefully.
All right. And Jenica, Romans 13:2.
Consequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves.
Okay. So, to fill in the blanks here, we break the fourth commandment by disobeying, dishonoring, disrespecting, or angering God's representatives. Even just, being excessively, obnoxiously annoying just to intentionally get under their skin is a breaking of this commandment. Looking at the next question, according to the underlined portion of these passages, why is it such a terrible thing when people disrespect, dishonor, or disobey any authority? Look at the underlined part.
It's like them rebelling.
Against
The
whom?
older, wiser people.
Rebelling against what God has instituted. And if God has instituted it, if I have said, Macy, you're in charge, and you disrespecting Macy, it's not just Macy you're disrespecting, right? Disrespecting me because I'm the one who put her in authority. In the same way, when we disrespect those that God has placed in authority over us, it's not just those people that we are disrespecting, it's God. And so, the answer there, they are disrespecting, dishonoring, or disobeying God. All right. So when someone behaves in one of these ways, God wants his representatives to handle the situation through correction, rebuking, discipline, or punishment. The purpose of this is to train proper behavior and prevent us from falling under God's judgment. Otherwise, we will become emboldened in the sinful behavior. Case in point example, in the Bible, there are two individuals, sons of Eli the high priest, named Hophni and Phinehas. Eli may have been a faithful servant of God, but he never ever disciplined his sons. And as a result, they would steal the offerings that the Israelites brought to the tabernacle, and they would also take the women who showed up and, have sex with them. I mean, imagine that, Jalen. If women come into church and all of a sudden two of the three anyway, pastors here doing that, how would God's reputation look? Pretty bad, wouldn't it? It's pretty awful. How did they get that far? You don't just wake up one morning and start doing that. It's because sin is like a line in the sand. Once you cross it, it can be very difficult. It takes a lot of control to go back. But if you keep crossing new lines, eventually you get way out here, and good luck getting back. And that was the case with Hophni and Phinehas. Another lady that I once knew in the area of my previous call, from what I can tell, her parents never disciplined her. She's my age. Parents never disciplined her. And as a result, she grew up living and acting as if the rules did not apply to her. She was a compulsive liar, did lots of inappropriate things. It is strongly suspected that she intentionally burned her house down so she could get a better house. Can't prove it, but it's strongly suspected. Eventually, she had crossed so many lines, burned so many bridges in the community, that one day one of the members of the community, a member of my church, said that everybody in El Dorado would like to take a swing at her, and her father would hold her down. He'd only allow you to get one hit, but he would hold her down. That's how bad it was. Well, she is, for years now, had to leave town. She's been gone, I don't know, almost 10 years, whatever. Doesn't show herself again, and from what I can tell, has no contact with the 4 children that she mothered with 3, I think, different guys. So, oh yeah, not the right setting for that comment. So, it is very important that there be that discipline for us. Otherwise, we are going to become emboldened in sin. So the different terms here, first of all, to correct, meaning to change a person's behavior so that it isn't wrong. To rebuke, to express sharp, stern disapproval of. And then you have discipline, to train by instruction and exercise. Now, that might involve a little bit of pain. You know, okay, you're grounded for a week, or say sayonara to your phone for a month, or whatever. But that's all part of discipline. It's not just retributive to make you suffer. That is what we call punishment, to subject to pain, loss, or penalty. Getting sent to jail, that is punishment. Getting sent to death row, that is punishment. And speaking of which, let's look at the next set of passages. Romans 13, 3 and 4. Jada.
But if you do wrong, be afraid, because he does not carry the sword without reason. He is God's servant, a punisher to bring wrath on the wrongdoer.
Again, we got the sword. The instrument of death, of imposing a will on the other. Genesis 9. Jalen.
In fact, I will hold each animal and each person responsible for your lifeblood. I will hold each man responsible for the life of his brother. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For God made man in his own image.
Okay, so according to the underlying portions here, have you ever heard of capital punishment? And what is it, and does God permit it?
Like, isn't that whatever Constitution like does not permit punishment?
No, some states allow for capital punishment, including the state of South Dakota.
Oh, that's the death penalty, isn't it?
That is the death penalty, yes. That's what you're going to say, Jada? Yes. And does God permit it, based on what we just read?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's when the government executes someone for a crime. And yeah. Now, are the governments required to use capital punishment?
No.
No. Does capital punishment serve as a deterrent to crime?
Yeah.
Actually, you know what's interesting? The threat of capital punishment really, and statistics and studies have shown this, really has no impact on whether or not a person will commit a crime that would warrant that. It's rather interesting. So it's not the deterrent that people would think it would be. I mean, I would think so as well. But that's probably because I also have a respect for and a fear of the government in those regards. Now, are there any dangers that you could think of with capital punishment?
Kill himself.
Kill themselves, what do you mean?
Wait, what?
Wait, what is right?
I'm so confused.
Isn't the only way to get capital punishment is like homicide?
In America, pretty much, yeah. That's about the only way, but not necessarily in other countries. You okay, Paige?
Yeah.
You look like you're either tired or sick. You're tired? Okay. Do you think that everybody who has faced a death penalty was guilty?
Yeah.
No.
Probably not.
You would honestly do?
Well, why would they kill them if they didn't know for sure?
That is a great question to be asking. Unfortunately, there have been plenty of innocent people throughout the ages who have died at the hands of the government, with the government thinking that they were acting justly. That's a scary thought.
Isn't there like a good Samaritan law though?
What do you mean by that?
So if you like try to save someone when they're dying, and if they die, it's not your fault.
Well, that's, yeah, you're not guilty of a crime. You didn't kill them. What we're talking about here, and especially in respect to murder, is, in America anyways, it's murder, but it's not just any murder. It's there has to be some sort of intent and just a huge depraved indifference that would warrant this, or maybe the volume of people that you kill. If you think of a serial killer or a mass murderer. Now, recognizing that the innocent have at times been put to death for crimes that they did not commit, I will say that personally, now this is just my opinion, others can have different opinions and that's fine, but it's my opinion that capital punishment, that the death penalty is a good thing and it should be practiced. Having said that, I think that there are some improvements that could be made upon the system. One, kind of what you were saying, that they need to make sure that they are the ones who did the crime. The bar for conviction in this country to be convicted of a crime is beyond a reasonable doubt. Because you're never going to prove things, almost never prove things to a 100% certainty. Lawyers aren't concerned about that. What they're concerned with is the probable explanation of events. So if there is no reasonable doubt, you have the level to convict. I think personally that the standard for moving along with the death penalty has to be even higher than that, where there is absolutely no doubt that this person is the one who pulled the trigger. Yes, Caleb?
I think they should bring back two things. Firing squad and the guillotine.
I like the firing squad idea. Yeah, especially the firing squad. I'm not so much a fan of, or just hanging. I'm not so much a fan of the other current methods, but that's a side issue. The other thing is this. What I don't like about our current system is that a lot of times people are sitting on death row for 30 or more years. So just think about that for a second. You know, think about sitting in prison 30 years and then all of a sudden, now it's time for you to be killed. Why do they have to wait so long? Part of it is, hey guys, part of it is called the appeals process. And they're appealing the conviction, they're appealing the death sentence and those things. And it takes time. In my opinion, you could improve upon things. You can fast track their case and get it appealed and resolved a lot quicker. So there's a little bit more of an imminency to these things, rather than them sitting, you know, they commit a crime as a 20-year-old and they're not getting, the lethal injection until they're 50. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. So there are improvements I think can be made, but in and of itself, I think the death penalty is a reasonable thing. Not as a deterrent. Part 5. How do we keep the fourth commandment? Again, a number of passages there. Caleb, I believe, you have Colossians 3.
Children, obey your parents in everything, for this is pleasing in the Lord.
Okay, so obey your parents. Brody, next one.
Remind them to be subject to rulers and authority to obey, to be ready to do the same.
Okay. We've already had Romans 13, submit yourselves to the governing authority. 1 Thessalonians 5, Aaliyah.
Now we ask you, brothers, to respect those who work hard among you, who are over you in the Lord, and who admonish you. Hold them in the highest regard and love because of their work. Live in peace with each other.
So holding them in the highest regard and love. 1 Kings 2:19. Adesha.
So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him on behalf of
Adonijah.
Adonijah. The king met her and bowed down to her. Then he sat on his throne and also set up a throne for the king's mother, and she sat at his right hand.
All right, notice, he's the king, but what did he do for his mom? Yeah, so we keep the fourth commandment by obeying, loving, and respecting God's representatives and submitting to their authority, even when they are old, and we no longer live under their authority. You know, the day is going to come when you move out from your parents. And it might not be as far off as you think. Especially for those of you who are 13, 14 years old. Maybe it starts with a trial run with college, living in the dormitory. Maybe it's something a little more permanent, an apartment. Now, we've been saying, obey the authorities, obey them, obey them. Should we always obey them?
No.
And if not, when shouldn't we?
If they're telling you some bad.
Yep, I think you understand where we're going with this. There is one exception to the fourth commandment.
Some smart guys.
Yep. Page, Acts 5.
After they brought them in, they had them stand before the
Sanhedrin.
The high priest asked them, "Did we not give you strict orders not to teach in Jesus' name? Look how you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching, and you are determined to bring this man's blood down on us." But Peter and the apostles replied, "We must obey God rather than men."
All right, so the Jewish ruling body, their government, their governing authorities, telling them, stop preaching in the name of Jesus. We already told you, knock it off. And what do they say? We must obey God rather than men. That kind of gives us a clue on the one exception. Macy, next passage, Daniel 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Answered King,
Nebuchadnezzar.
"We have no need to answer you about this matter, since your God, whom we serve, doesn't exist. He is able to save us from blazing
Fiery.
furnace, so he may save us from your hand, your majesty. But he does not. You should know, your majesty, that he will not serve your God and will not worship the golden statue that you set up."
Which you commanded us to worship, basically. Yeah, King Nebuchadnezzar said, worship this golden statue that's coming directly from the king. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego basically said, you can pound sand. We're not going to do it. We must worship the Lord our God and serve him only. He's the only God that exists. And, well, if you know the rest of the story, they're thrown into a fiery furnace, but they did not die. God protected them. So, what is the one time when God does not want us to follow the fourth commandment?
Do something bad.
What do you mean?
Person that tells us to do something wants us to do something bad.
Okay, I'm gonna polish that last word up. When his representatives tell us to do something which God forbids. Or you could say, tell us not to do something which God commands. You could say it that way too, both ways. The sin of commission and the sin of omission. The case of the Sanhedrin, that was them telling the apostles to omit what God had told them to do. So think about this a little bit more. We might not like the government, the person who is in position of authority. We might not agree with their policies. But does that give us the right to dishonor them, disobey them, disrespect them? No. And I see this happening far too often as the excuse or the justification. I don't like that guy or gal. I don't agree with them. I think they're bad for our city or bad for our country. And you see all sorts of disrespectful jokes on social media about them. all the time. And I see a lot of this even coming directly from God's people, from Christians. And it bothers me to no end. Because you ever hear the expression monkey see, monkey do? If that's the example that your parents are setting for you, you're going to start to ape what they're doing. Is it any surprise why the general level of disrespect among children has grown over the years? I mean, it's always been there to some degree. Sin is sin. Sin's always going to be there. But you do see it much more commonly these days. And I think a lot of that, not all, some of it has to do with broken homes and a chaotic home life for kids. Kids need stability, security, balance, consistency, and some have been robbed of those things. But some of it also is the example that moms and dads set through how they talk. Maybe how they're talking in regard to their ex. You know, my ex-wife is, blah, 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 blah. Well, you should never be saying those things in front of your child. But you're teaching the child to disrespect their mother or their father. And that's not appropriate. The only time when we have the right to refuse what they are telling us to do is when they tell us to do something which God forbids. There's other sorts of things that I could talk about in regard to this, but I'm not going to get too much into the weeds tonight. We'll keep it simple for you. But getting into our last section then, the fourth commandment in my life. Question number 1. What if someone in authority abuses their power? Does God still expect me to honor such a person who abuses justice, rules, or parents unfairly? And do these circumstances qualify as an exception to the commandment to honor, serve, and obey them, and give them love and respect? So if your parents aren't parenting how they should or how you think they should, does that give you the right?
No.
No? What if the government is killing innocent people? Think of Stalin, for example. I mean, that guy, you think Adolf Hitler killed loads of innocents? He don't hold a candle to Stalin. Hitler was probably responsible for about 11 million. Stalin, I think it's over 30 million of his own people.
Who's that?
Joseph Stalin, he was the leader, the premier of Russia or the Soviet Union during and a little after World War II.
Oh, the communism guy, right?
Yes.
That guy. That guy.
Yes. Mao Zedong. He was dung. See what I did there? She gets it. He is responsible for the death of millions and millions of Chinese people under his leadership. That give us the right, if you're living under them, to disobey?
No.
Let's watch a video first.
Oh, yeah.
I don't mind your answer, Kayla, but let's watch a video because I did see a little bit of head nodding, like, okay, maybe then, yes.
The Miracle of Mercy. David and Saul. This is David.
Hey.
David was a shepherd who lived in Israel. David was chosen by God to be the next king of Israel when he was just a boy. But David had to wait a very long time until that promise would come true because there was another king of Israel named Saul. Saul was strong and tall and looked like everything a king should be. But Saul did not follow God like he was supposed to, and for that reason, God chose to take the kingdom from Saul's family and give it to David's. David became a great warrior. And everyone in the kingdom loved David. This made Saul jealous, and Saul hated David because he thought he would try to kill him and take the throne from his family. So Saul wanted to kill David. Whoa! Saul hunted David, but he couldn't catch him. One day, Saul heard that David was in the wilderness of En-Gedi. So Saul gathered 3,000 of his skilled fighters and went to find and kill David. During Saul's search for David, he went in a cave to relieve himself. Well, this very cave was the one where David and his men were hiding. And when David's men saw that Saul was unaware that David was there and unable to defend himself, they said, "Now's your chance, David. This is God telling you that he will give you your enemy to do with as you wish." So David crept forward and cut off a piece of Saul's robe. But then David began to think that it was not right for him to take Saul's life. For no matter how much hardship and difficulty Saul had caused him, it was still not right for him to hurt the one who God had placed over Israel. So David told his men to back off, and he did not let them kill King Saul. They waited until after Saul had left the cave. And then David ran out of the cave and shouted after Saul, "My king! Why do you listen to people who say I am trying to harm you? Look, I cut it off, but I didn't kill you. This proves that I am not trying to harm you and that I have not sinned against you, even though you've been hunting me." David went on to promise that he would never harm Saul. David said that God would be the one to protect David and to rescue him from Saul's power. Saul said, "Is that really you, David?" And he began to cry. Saul said, "You are a better man than I. You have been amazingly kind to me today, for when God put me in a place where you could have killed me, you didn't do it. Who else would have done this? And now I realize that you are surely going to be king, and the kingdom of Israel will flourish under your rule. But promise me that when that happens, you will not kill my family." So David promised that he would not hurt Saul's family, and they left each other in peace. Now Saul continued to cause difficulty in David's life. But David kept his promise, and in time, David did become king of Israel. David was dearly loved by God, and Israel did flourish under his rule because David did everything that God wanted him to do, and he was a man after God's own heart.
King Saul was no doubt an evil king as time went on. There's a guy who abused his power. He killed a lot of innocent people along the way to try to get to David. Spent years hunting David down where David had to live on the lam. And yet, when God literally delivered Saul right into David's hands, what did David do? He said, "I'm not going to lift up my hand and strike the Lord's anointed," right? And so the answer to this question here that we already heard, you can start writing down. I'll keep talking, but the Bible shows us that we're to keep the fourth commandment even when the authorities are evil. The confidence that we have is that God assures us that He's going to deal with them in His own time and way, and that they are doubly responsible for the power and authority that God has given to them. You know, this can be a very hard one to go along with, especially when you have seen horrible atrocities of injustice. And I get it. But we see David's example. And there's going to be a little bit more that I'm going to talk about in regard to this once we get to question number 4, the last question here. But think about it in these terms. Some feel that they don't need to honor or obey or respect the authorities if they haven't earned it. But think about that in relationship with your parents. Think if you said that regarding your mom and dad. I don't have to honor or serve you or obey you until you've earned it. Think about if you said that to your mom and dad. A rather snarky but maybe fitting response back from them would be, okay, but I'm not going to love you until you've earned it.
Wow.
Respect can go both ways.
Is that how you want the arrangement, the situation to work?
No. I think it's
No. It's not how it works. And we understand that and recognize that. And yet that's still how some people behave. Okay, question 2. It's a Tuesday night. All your homework's done. There's nothing to do. Some of your friends are going out to a late night movie that you've been dying to see. Since you've taken care of your responsibilities, you feel that there wouldn't be anything wrong with going out with your friends. And so you tell your mom all this. But your mom tells you that you can't go. You're upset and say some sassy and disrespectful things for which you get your electronic devices taken away and you're sent to your room. Why would respecting your mom's decision have been the better choice? And going, obviously the first part you wouldn't have been disciplined. So let's just get that one out of the way right away. Why would it be a good thing to be honoring your mom in this situation?
Maybe she would change her mind.
Okay, there's always a chance for that. I'm going to say as an adult, as a parent, probably slim to none. Unless you've got a very good, compelling reason. What night of the week is it?
Oh, it's a Tuesday night.
All right. What's that?
School night.
Yeah, school night. And what's so important about that? How does that factor in?
Sleep.
Sleep. What is the average hours of sleep that a teenager needs?
Like
Nice.
6.
12.
Dude,
2?
Some people
8
go
to 10 hours a night is what the average amount of sleep that a teenager needs. Teenagers need more sleep than adults. That's why I have very little problem with teenagers who sleep in the mornings. I once did it myself. I could sleep no problem. I lost that ability when I was 23 years old. I remember even the specific week that it happened.
That's crazy.
October of 2003.
Oh, no.
Yep, I remember. That's what stress will do to you. Yeah, so your answer there, obviously, like I said, you wouldn't have been disciplined, but you'd recognize that your mom loves you, and she's not doing this to be a jerk to you. She's thinking of your best interest, so you can get a good night's rest, so that you can function properly in the morning. Thankfully, as you get older, you don't necessarily need as much sleep to function. You're still tired, but you can manage, you can push through.
Get between 5 and 6.
If I don't have enough
You get up between
sleep-
5 and 6?
5 on if I work out, 6 on a normal day.
Wow.
If I don't get enough sleep, I will be the worst person.
Crazy.
If I don't get sleep,
I believe that you would be a bear. Yes.
Yeah, even fishes.
Yep. I believe that.
I'm cranky with enough sleep. Just a little cranky fish.
Okay. Moving on to question number 3. 5 months ago, John moved out of his parents' house and into an apartment. One day his mom stops by and sees his dirty bedroom. She orders him to clean it up. Is John wrong in any way when he politely tells her that it's his room and he doesn't have to clean it?
No.
You're saying no.
Granted, okay, if he paid for the house, okay.
Or apartment.
Just hear me out, okay.
Yep.
Granted, she is the parent, right?
His mom.
Right.
Yep.
He is the
Owner.
He is the owner, and his house, if he paid for it all, then I would say take the suggestion, but otherwise it shouldn't be forced. But if if his parents' house paid for it, then yes.
All right. Now, there's an interesting thought. that I haven't considered. That last statement is very interesting. If mom and dad are in on the payments, then okay. But that initial part that you said up front, I'm going to come back to it once I hear from Jalen.
Also, you probably paid for the clothes.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily. It's only been 5 months. Mom might have still paid for a bunch of them. Aaliyah?
Just ask her why it bugs her so much because it's not her house and it's.
All right. You know what? Caleb, out of all the times I've gone through this illustration, I've been doing this for like 17 years or various iterations of it. With children your age, with adults, nobody has ever given a more thoughtful, introspective answer than Caleb did right there. Considering the various aspects and different angles of all of this. You are right. John no longer lives under her roof or authority. It is his place. And but I like that you said he might be wise to take her suggestion. You even threw that in there, which was really, really good. Yep. I mean, think of it this way. You grow up here in America, but at some point in the future, you, for whatever reason, decide to renounce your American citizenship and you move to France. Does the President of the United States have any right to tell you what to be doing?
No.
Why not?
Well, because he's the president of the
United States, not France. You are correct because you are not living under the authority of the United States of America's president. Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of older people almost all the time will say, yeah, he's doing wrong because he should listen to mom and dad. It's funny. No, but then when I talk about it in the context of, you know, the whole country illustration that I just did, okay, now they begin to see, yeah, that doesn't work. All right. Last couple of passages. I have no idea who we left off with for reading.
No. What?
Ladesha?
What?
All right, we'll go Ladesha.
What?
She likes to read anyway.
Luke?
Yeah, Luke 2.
Jesus went down with his parents and he came to Nazareth. He was always obedient to them.
All right. Why they chose to translate as obedient? I don't get it. The word there does not have, it's not obey, it's not obedient. The Greek word there is hypotasso. I mentioned that word earlier. What does that word mean?
Submit.
Submit, yeah. Notice, Jesus submitted to his earthly parents. Now, Jesus is God. Who's higher up than who here?
God.
Yeah, God is higher up than Joseph and Mary. And yet God, who is their creator, now is submitting to them. Which really helps you to see that submitting is not necessarily a demeaning, belittling thing. But Jesus did this to his parents. He never disobeyed them. Last passage, John 18.
When he said this, one of the guards standing there hit Jesus in the face. Is that how you answer the high priest? He demanded. If I said something wrong, Jesus answered, testify about what I was wrong. But if I was right, why did you hit me?
And the guy, he had no way to answer. Like, I guess you didn't do anything wrong. So, question number 4, the Fourth Commandment teaches us about the honor, love, and respect that we are to show toward God's representatives in the home, church, and state. But often we've been disobedient, disrespectful, and unloving toward them and their hard work on our behalf. But although we are guilty, there is good news for us. Again, how do Jesus' active obedience and his passive obedience give us hope when we break the Fourth Commandment? That we're not, Ladesha is like, woo! When she saw read about the bears earlier, and we don't have to worry about being mauled by a couple of bears. Well, Jesus kept that Fourth Commandment perfectly for us. He respected his parents, and he even suffered unjustly at the hands of the church and state. And then died to pay the price for every time that we disobey God's authority. Going back to that little story about King David. Some might want to say if the government is abusing their power, that gives us the right to resist, to rebel. Our Christian faith wouldn't be possible without Jesus going along with it, not resisting an unjust government. Without the actions of those cruel men, Jesus would not have gotten to the cross. Our faith is founded on this principle. And when you take a look at the early history of the Christian church, when the government, the Roman government, local governments were persecuting them, did they flee when they could? Yeah, sure. But they did not rise up in rebellion and resist the inappropriate actions of the government against them. They were willing to be martyred. And God, what we see here in those cases and in the case of Jesus, is that God can work through the unjust actions of government to bring about blessings for his church. Because as those early Christians were persecuted and even martyred for their faith, what ended up happening is that their willingness to lay down their lives without resisting left an indelible impression upon the people of the ancient Mediterranean world. Those people would never have died for their pagan gods. Never willing to give up their lives. But they're seeing these Christians being butchered by the bushel. And doing just that very thing. Why? What was worth it to them? And like I said, that left an indelible impression and is one of the big factors that led the ancient Roman Empire, the empire that at times actively persecuted Christians, to one day eventually becoming Christian. God can work through those things to accomplish his will. So, the last thing that we got here, just the chart. God blesses us by the church, the home, and the government, but especially the home. Through his representatives, and then telling us the things then to do and not do. Any other questions or comments before we close? Somebody's got to go. Somebody's got to go do a King Saul. Let's close with the blessing. Yeah, now he gets it. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and remain with us all. Amen. Have a good night.